Welcome to the business conversation. Today we have Derek Sussner of Sussner Design Company, and we're going to be talking a little bit about StoryBrand today. But first, we want to thank our sponsors. First, the beautiful studio we're in is provided by Sussner. We also have our sponsor AIGA, the design company. And then we also have Forage, who's taking the lead, their marketing operations company. And finally, the Content Reactor, a content firm. So now we're going to jump right in and get started talking to our guests. But before we talk about StoryBrand, why don't we talk a little bit about what you do, Derek?
Great question. Sussner Design Company specializes in helping brands stand out from the crowd. We find that most marketing leaders are challenged in differentiating themselves from their competition. And our primary goal is to help them with that through re-energizing their brands, capturing their competitive edge, and hopefully leading to achieving some of the business results and goals that they're after.
Awesome. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got there, like from your journey to get to that point?
Sure. So my background is in brand identity, in graphic design. And I think the focus of helping companies lay the foundation for their brand through clear messaging that connects with customers and helps really quickly and effectively articulate what they do, to the visual experience, brand style guides, logos, colors, photography, etc.
Yeah.
And then through the marketing tactics that help them connect with their customers. Websites, product packaging, sales collateral, or environmental graphics are typically the deliverables that we work on.
Yeah, and in a previous conversation that we had, you talked about the process of shifting from selling branding products to focusing on the branding needs of your clients. Can you tell us a little bit about how that shift took place?
Somebody much smarter than me pointed out that people make the mistake, companies and businesses and the people within them tend to make the mistake of selling to customers or potential customers external problems.
Yeah.
Whereas in fact, what people actually buy are solutions to their internal problems. So we, like I think maybe many, especially creative companies are probably guilty of, would come into a conversation with a prospective customer and lead with the tactical executions and the stuff that we designed in the past.
Yeah.
So we would come in with logos and websites and brochures, etc., and then pause and say, so what do you need? What do you want? How can we help you? But the shift in thinking about what the customer's problem is first seems pretty simple,
Yeah.
but it helps set the stage for that entire conversation to be a whole different way. Instead of a one-sided kind of pitch or presentation like I just described, by starting with figuring out what they need and what their problem is, and then to see if our solutions even fit those needs. Just seemed to be a really comfortable shift for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mean, so I don't buy Jell-O just for the pretty packaging? Is what you're...
Yeah, exactly. You have a very specific frustration that you're dealing with, and that frustration is solved by Jell-O, probably cherry or strawberry, right?
Yeah, exactly. So how has this shift changed your mindset when you're working on, let's say, a creative project?
The shift, the paradigm shift that came specifically is in how we think about what the customer needs and who we are in that relationship. And so we'll talk about this when we dig into StoryBrand.
Yeah.
But the whole premise is to think of yourself as the guide in the story. Our customers, our clients, and their brands are looking to tell a great story with their brand.
Yeah.
And I think that most businesses make the mistake of, in telling that story and in storytelling terminology, of positioning themselves as the hero in the story. And when you position yourself as the hero, you start by listing off a bunch of facts about, we do this, we're great at this, our expertise is this.
Yeah.
But that isn't conducive to having a really good two-way conversation. a friend of mine says, facts just tell, but stories help sell.
Yeah.
And so by thinking about us as the guide to what our customers need and us being a service or a resource to help them get what they want, just completely changes the way that we approach our projects. So the process that we go through, the steps that we go through, the sort of behind the scenes stuff that go into building a brand identity, a lot of those creative exercises are the same, but we lay the whole thing out now from the beginning with a tool called a brand script, which is a story brand tool.
Awesome. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. It resonates with other research on messaging, like start with why.
Yeah, the Simon Sinek and his golden circle.
Yeah, exactly. Really cool. So why don't we jump right into StoryBrand then? We'll talk about what it is a little bit. So maybe you can share that with us. What is
Sure.
StoryBrand?
At its core, StoryBrand is a framework to help clarify messaging that's more effective, that helps make your marketing materials more effective.
Yeah.
StoryBrand is based on a book called Building a Story Brand, authored by Donald Miller, who took age-old storytelling principles. You referenced the hero's journey when we spoke last time. That was authored by Joseph Campbell, which is what George Lucas credits the whole Star Wars premise on the cadence and the rhythm of having a hero and a guide, a conflict and a plan, and a solution or a resolution for success.
Yeah.
So Donald Miller and his team broke out this framework into 7 parts. And those 7 parts are the key aspects in basically telling a good story, but a simple story. And by following that framework, I came across it simply because we, as in my own company, ironically, one of our expertise is in helping our customers articulate what they do to help them connect with their customers. And ironically, we as a branding firm, design firm, have historically done a really, really awful job of telling our own story. We've always struggled with it. And StoryBrand presented, when StoryBrand presented us as the guide in the story to our customers instead of as the hero, I realized that whether we were doing it intentionally or not, had positioned ourselves as the hero in the story. And that paradigm shift of thinking about that relationship differently changed everything. So I went into StoryBrand excited about getting better at how we can help ourselves, but the outcome became a tool that I realized really quickly that this is something that we can utilize to do a better job of helping our customers.
Yeah, and you mentioned before too that when you used to give your elevator pitch or your few sentence explanation of what you do, it used to make you feel uncomfortable. How did StoryBrand change that?
It turns it into a conversation instead of a pitch. There's another reference out there that I've been highly influenced by over the years called Win Without Pitching. There's a great book by Blair Enns called The Win Without Pitching Manifesto. And I've learned a ton from him and his and all the different things that he teaches and shares. But the one big difference is Win Without Pitching takes the angle for your elevator speech of positioning you as the hero. And so it starts by one elevator speech, or I would say the former guide that we would use in creating an elevator speech talks about your expertise in your area for what kind of clientele. So we do this for these people. We're the leading, we're the best, we're the top. How many websites do you go to where right there at the front it says, we are the leading, we are the expertise, we are the whatever. And that authority and expertise is absolutely relevant, but there's a better way to connect with somebody maybe right out of the gates. So StoryBrand teaches a different way of writing your elevator pitch. StoryBrand teaches a different way of writing the elevator speech. They refer to it as a one-liner, but essentially it's composed of 3 pieces. You state the problem that your customers are running into, then you touch on the solution that you provide, and then you paint a picture of the success that their life looks like having engaged you to help them. So it starts with them.
Yeah.
Just like Simon Sinek would say, it starts with why. That elevator pitch, that speech, that conversation, it starts with your customer and your client and what they need and what their problem is, versus starting the whole conversation with, we are the best at, we are the premier, we are the experts in X, want to hire us? It can be the same information in that conversation, but it's positioned backwards or flipped.
Yeah. Instead of me, it's you.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. So why is this so important, would you say, so we think of StoryBrand maybe as a tool for copywriters or people in the writing industry, but why is it so important for design and creative work?
I think the StoryBrand tool, the StoryBrand framework, is a phenomenal guide that helps you shape the conversation and the information that you gather to help you understand the objectives and the problems that your clients face. Better than maybe anything I've come across, and it's simple. The StoryBrand brand script, these kind of 7 sections, it's a great guide for an initial conversation that you have with a prospect. If the phone rings and somebody calls you and says, "Hey guys, I need some content." Instead of you figuring out where to start, it's a perfect segue or guide into how that conversation can happen. It sets up the foundational dialogue that helps you with your own website, with your all the messaging and the content and the direction. So, I mean, I remember designing really great looking websites for clients in the past, and ending up with kind of a blank slate that looked really great, but with no content in there. And we would get totally stuck or paralyzed about where do we start with the content, what should it be, what's the direction.
Yeah.
StoryBrand's just a really functional tool that just helps by asking these 7 relatively simple questions, helps you get going, helps you get started.
Awesome. Yeah, and what initially drew you to this process? How did you get from having these problems with figuring out how to tell the customer story to discovering StoryBrand?
It's a great question. I was actually attended an executive peer group, a group of business owners, and we were going around the table introducing ourselves and sharing our background. And then it was my first meeting. And so the facilitator of the group, after we all said what it is that we do, asked me what it was that I was looking to get out of this meeting. And my answer was, well, one of the things I'm trying to get better at is answering the question that you guys just asked. And he goes, well, I'm glad you said that, because I still don't know what you do after what you told me. So to say, I own a graphic design company, which people may or may not know what that is. We're located in this part of town. We've been in business for this many years. I work with this many people. Doesn't necessarily have a connection with that person who is a prospective customer to say, oh, those guys do something that might be helpful to me. And he introduced me to StoryBrand. So I started with an Audible, listening to it in the car on my way to work and back every day. And I ended up taking so many notes while I was driving. It got really unsafe and pretty ridiculous. So I finally bought the book, blew through it in a weekend, and I was blown away not only by the information that is shared, but by how accessible and actionable it is. A lot of business books paint the problem, but to get the solution, you have to hire the author or their company or buy a product or a service or a software or something to get that. They lay it out right there for you. So it was an instantly actionable tool that helped us right out of the gates.
That's great. And you mentioned our conversation about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. What advantage is there for people or business owners to read the Building a StoryBrand book versus trying to dig into those textbooks?
I think if you're a literary expert and are really in depth at reading educational, really deep, highly intellectual level of books, then the hero's journey might be great. This takes the key components of what I think, the common elements, and it distills it down into something that's very, very accessible. I think if you were a screenwriter or writing a script for a movie, there's a lot more complexity and nuance that you can bring into it. But for most of us in our own businesses and our own marketing purposes, we're trying to be simpler, more clear, and get to the answer of how we can connect with our customers on a much quicker basis.
Yeah, it sounds like StoryBrand is perfect for designers. I'm sure that telling the story often slows down the design process and slows down delivery to clients and things like that.
I think it speeds it up. I think I talked about using that tool to get us going.
Yeah.
We have a creative brief questionnaire, a list of 10 or 12 questions that we'll go through when we get started with a customer on a kicking off a project to gather all the relevant information. We've actually taken the StoryBrand brand script, these 7 components, and we've actually weaved them in to the questions that we ask. Because some of the ways that we ask those questions, the answers to which is our customers, their target market's pain point, and the things that they're trying to communicate to them, that this tool helps us through that conversation actually get to some answers that can be amazingly inspiring to the creative process, both in the writing process and in the actual graphic design branding process too.
Yeah, oh, and I think I phrased that the wrong way. I meant to say that not knowing how to tell the story slows down the process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Getting stuck on, some people think of their story as their history. And so they tell you where they came from and how they got there. While that's all relevant, I think of your brand story as what's going on right now and where you want to go. It's a more aspirational, future forward-looking piece that I think any branding or branding effort is trying to do. It's trying to look forward and help you get to where your business is trying to go.
Makes sense. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about some takeaways. What designers can take away from this conversation, what we've had on StoryBrand. So how can designers or people or business owners in general incorporate StoryBrand into their marketing activities?
Well, the one thing that StoryBrand's really good about is being generous with their content. If you go to, I believe it's mystorybrand.com, I think if you trade your email address for it, you can get access to what they call their brand script tool for free. It's a digital tool that you can use to actually walk through your brand script. So anybody for free can go there and use that tool, whether without reading the book or without spending a dime.
Yeah.
And that tool, even if somebody got stuck and then needed somebody else's help getting through it, help from somebody who's experienced in doing that, even having visited that and gone through that themselves, it's an amazingly helpful, accessible tool. And the StoryBrand website's full of downloads and great free offerings, advice on what your website should and should not include, the kind of information that it should have and where. But they are expert marketers, so if you give them your email, you will be added to their mailing list.
Well, that's to be expected. At least you're getting all that.
Yeah, but it's great content. Yeah.
And you mentioned too, that one thing you like about it is that everybody can do it.
Yep. It's very accessible. It's super easy, and like I said, easy is maybe not the right word, but it's very thoughtful, and it's not rocket science. The thing that the other thing that's encouraging is I think designers, creatives in general, writers don't want to think that they're using a template or a formula or something where they're copying, pasting, and redoing the same thing over and over. I think the beauty of this is it's not that. We're not taking a template and just changing the colors and changing the words. That's why I think of it as a tool and not a template. And it's a tool that is accessible to anybody. I've seen it in the last 2 years that we've been working with this, and in the year since I ended up getting certified as a StoryBrand guide, we've applied this to a dozen different clients in completely different industries with completely different backgrounds. And more often than not, the sentiment coming out of that brief exercise is that it's always been so hard to tell our story. It's so complicated and so complex. And usually by the time we're done with that first exercise, their feedback is that they can't believe how simple this was. Like, really? It can be that simple? It can be that simple? Can we just say what we do that quickly? And you really can.
Well, that leads us to a fun exercise that I thought we'd do. So, to kind of illustrate the value of story brand and how it works, maybe you could tell us how you would have described what you do before story brand, and how you describe it now.
Sure. So before, I probably experimented and stumbled around with all kinds of different ways. One way we might have said was Sussner Design Company is a graphic design firm that specializes in brand identity work. We're located in the North Loop of downtown Minneapolis and work with clients in a variety of different industries. Most people have glazed over and tuned out by the time I've got halfway through that. Sometimes we would say we're a graphic design firm that's been around for 20 years and that has worked for clients X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Now we just start off by stating the problem that we solve that our customers run into, and we'll say, a lot of our customers have a challenge getting their brand to stand out from the crowd of competition, and that's what we help with. We help the marketing leaders in those organizations re-energize their brands to realize their competitive edge and achieve some pretty outstanding results. So to the story brand template, it would say, who do you serve? What is their problem? What do you do for them? And what is that positive outcome? And you can say that and rearrange that in all kinds of different ways, but that's been taking a lot of pressure off of me in a networking event or social situation to say, what do you do?
Yeah, and it's surprising how simple it is, but thinking about the shift that it did for me in my mind, it takes it away from trying to think about what you do and apply it to myself to instantly knowing the value I would get with working with you.
So Content Reactor is the leading social copywriting firm in the Twin Cities, providing companies with blogs, content, website copy, and social expertise.
Yeah.
Might be the way that I used to say it. Now I might say something like, Content Reactor helps marketing leaders and businesses with content, blogs, copywriting that lead to better SEO results, quicker connections with their customers, and more than anything, to allow you to go back and do all the other things within your business that you need to be doing because you don't want to or can't or don't have the time to be frustrated over when this next blog article is due.
Yeah, that's amazing how simple that is.
Yeah.
And instantly, it's a shift from that me again to what are the concerns of who's reading the messaging? What are the concerns of my potential clients?
Yep. I think if you think about when you're talking about what you do, if you think about, we all think about our customers and our target market, but if you can think of that as an actual human being within an organization and the specific role that they serve in that company, the tasks that they do, and the frustrations that they deal with, and they're common. Everybody's out of time. Everybody's anxious or frustrated or nervous. We're all trying to meet deadlines or grow our companies or meet revenue goals. But I think if you think about that actual human being and what they're trying to achieve and what their problems are, it makes the conversation connect a lot more quickly than just talking to a generic business or company.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I have a fun question for you. Thinking about your firm and your creative process, what's something that your team does that's unique, maybe, that adds to your creative process or that helps you guys create in a different way?
We play a lot of ping pong. There's one exercise that we have. It helps us key in on what we think of as the desired brand attributes or the aspirational personality traits that in a brand that we're either building or refreshing, that brand wants to convey to their audience. So it's an aspirational exercise. I think a lot of companies are really stuck on what they are today, and maybe again because we think about the problems, they're thinking about who they are but what they don't want to be instead of focusing on what they could be. And one of the tricks that we'll often use in having a conversation around the desired personality is we'll talk about a vehicle, a beverage, or sometimes a food. And on occasion, if they're dog owners, dogs are great too. But if I said to you, what kind of vehicle do you think of when you think about how you want people to perceive your company?
Well, I like Lamborghinis. So I would go.
So fast, sporty, powerful, extremely expensive, rare, and beautiful. So if you think about, it's even fun to think, like, we'll have companies say they're a certain make of, they're a Chevy, for example. And so they may start with a brand, but are you a Chevy SUV or are you a car? Are you something that's functional, luxurious? Is the interior leather? Is it about safety? Is it about the cargo? Or is it about the speed, or both? And so, but it can lead to some really, really enlightening, fascinating conversations. Instead of just saying to a client, what do you want to look like? There's a couple of guys, you think about beverage.
Yeah.
Think about, within all the world of beverages, just beer. If a company said, I think we're beer, that opens up a whole nother avenue of, well, what kind of beer? Is it mass market? Is it craft? Is it local? Is it international? And then what kind of flavor? Sometimes that's really helped us help clients kind of get their guard down and turns it into more of a conversation instead of just feeling like they're answering a worksheet question.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You can already start to visualize the different routes that doing that exercise would take you. Awesome. And finally, so what's your favorite business book?
Other than Building a Story Brand and Win Without Pitching, which I mentioned before, I think one of my favorites that I've read recently is the E-Myth Revisited.
Oh, yeah.
One of those books, I think it's been around for a while, but I only read it recently, and it's absolutely on my short list of I wish I would have read that a long time ago.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Derek.
Thanks, been a pleasure to be